The Little Girl at the Train Station. Short horror story number 1. 3 years ago, I was walking to the train station from school. I typically take the train 3 stops down south and then take a 15-minute walk from there back home. I usually don't run into any issues along the way. Nobody comes up to me and asks for change, picking a fight, or talking trash from a distance. It's usually a peaceful route back home, actually. But one day, Tuesday, November 13th, 2007, to be exact, I remember this day well because I had my math midterm that day, so I was walking towards the train station and saw this little girl just standing there. She was actually quite far from me, maybe around 20 meters away. She was just standing there looking at me. She was young, 10, 11 years old, maybe 4 feet tall at most. She had long black hair that reached her shoulders, and she wore some pretty clean clothes. Clean, modern clothes, actually. Nothing looked out of the ordinary with her, other than the fact that she was just there all alone, staring at me dead center. At first, I was wondering where her mother was and why she was at the train station all alone. Typically, this neighborhood is pretty safe. Nothing crazy happens around here, but nonetheless, it's still a train station. A public place where most people get around. I wouldn't really trust my daughter if I had one, but she's roaming this place all alone, you know what I mean? Whatever, I said. I kept my distance from her and waited for the train to come. Occasionally I glanced over to my right and looked at her and saw that she was still looking at me, dead center in the eyes. It was really freaky, actually, and this went on for a good 7 to 8 minutes before the train arrived. Well, let me tell you, when that train arrived, I never hopped on faster. When I got home later that day, I had dinner with my parents. It was the usual conversation. How was school? Did you do well in your exams? Do you have any plans for the rest of your week? Nothing too crazy, but I began telling my parents about the weird girl who was just standing there, staring at me from a distance at the train station. To my surprise, my parents got a little upset at me because I didn't walk over to her and ask if she needed help. And yeah, I understand, it's not very normal to see such a young girl usually roaming a station all alone, just staring at random strangers, but still, I'm not the type of person to approach a random person regardless of their age. In the end, I did nothing. I finished dinner and only felt semi-guilty about the whole situation. The next day, a Wednesday, after my mom dropped me off at school, I continued with my usual routine. Go to class, hang out with friends, study, and then just go home. I had completely forgotten about the girl by now and began walking towards the train station. Nothing new. To my surprise, however, when I arrived, the little girl was standing at the exact same spot, in the exact same clothes, hairstyle, everything. And I mean everything. It's as if she didn't move an inch throughout the entire 24 hours. Holy shit, that's messed up, I said to myself as I walked towards the train platform and began to wait for my train. The little girl was just standing there, constantly staring at me as if her life depended on it. The whole event was actually freaking me the hell out. I sighed and decided to walk over to her and ask if she needed help. I couldn't tell my parents that I left this girl alone 2 days in a row, so screw it. Let's see what's going on. The problem is, every time I take a step forward, she takes a step backwards. It's the weirdest reaction I've ever seen. 1 step forwards for me, 1 step backwards for her. 1 step forward for me, and again, 1 step backwards for her. It's bizarre, completely random. Maybe she's trying to stay away from strangers, sure, but what the hell? If that's the case, then go home. Stop staring at me, right? Whatever. I tried. I went back to my original spot after giving her the "what the hell do you want from me" gesture, and waited for the train. Same as the first time, when the train arrived, I got on and proceeded on home. However, this time, I didn't mention the girl to my parents and just went on with my day as normal. It's Thursday now, November 15th. As usual, nothing unordinary in the beginning half of my day. Mom drops me off at school and I continue with my day. Except this time, at the end of the day, I began to feel a little uneasy. In a way, for the first time in my life, I didn't want school to be done for the day. I was actually dreading going to the station. I didn't ask any of my friends if their parents can drive me home because what was I going to say? Hey, this little girl keeps haunting my ass at the station. Hell no. And not only that, but my parents were also at work, so there weren't any options at all. But even if they were, I wouldn't ask them either. I give an exasperated sigh, suck it up, and just begin walking to the station. To no surprise, the little girl was there. But something was different. Not her clothing, her hair, her height. No, all of that stuff was the same, as though she's never changed in her life. No, this time, today, she was standing closer to where I normally stand. Instead of her being roughly 20 meters away, she was maybe 13 or 14 meters away, and that caught me off guard. I didn't know if I should stand further away or stand in my usual spot this time. And of course, she was staring right at me. Same as the last couple of days, it's just her and I at the train station, nobody else in sight. So I decided to confront her, angrily. Hey, excuse me, why do you keep looking at me, and why are you here every single day? Is something wrong? Can I help you with something? She ignored me. And of course, same as last time, every step forward from me resulted in a step backwards from her. Except the only difference being that we were about 7 meters closer to one another than the last time. At this point, this is really starting to piss me off. If I see her tomorrow one more time, I'm going to call the cops and ask them to help me out. Something about this situation isn't alright. I can feel it in my gut. After about 6 or 7 minutes of waiting for the train, it finally arrived. I waited for some passengers to get off before I hopped on, occasionally glancing at the girl, seeing what she was doing. She was just standing there looking directly at me. Nothing new. However, this time when I got on the train, just before the doors closed, she runs into the train car, the one just behind mine. What the hell? I said to myself. Holy shit, thank God she's not in the same car as me. 10 minutes and 3 stops later, I arrive at my destination. I get off the train and look around, trying to find the little girl that got onto the train. Man, I hope she doesn't get off at this stop, I said to myself, somewhat feeling my heart increase in pace. I sighed in relief when the train doors closed and the train took off. No sign of her. Oh, thank God. The walk home from the station was a quiet one. Very few cars passed by, and I spent most of my time walking home in thought, wondering who the little girl was and why she appeared to be following me. Nothing like this has ever happened to me, and I don't want to ask for help. It would be weird if I just came out and told people that this 10-year-old girl was stalking me. Hell, I would laugh at my friends or my family if they came to me with that problem. It's strange. She just stands at the station, never taking her eyes off of me. Do others see her? Is she doing the same thing to others when I get on the train and go home, or is it just me? It's also strange how she always looks so clean and well-maintained despite wearing the same clothes 3 days in a row. I don't understand any of this. Regardless, if she's there tomorrow, I'm going to call the cops. And just like that, I've arrived home and continued my day as normal, mentioning nothing of my encounter with the girl to anybody. That very night, I had a strange dream that I remembered so vividly. I was lying in bed scrolling through YouTube and watching some videos. I typically enjoy catching up on some of my favorite YouTubers before I go to bed. Call it a bit of a routine of mine. And as I was watching a video with earphones on, I could hear a faint screaming. I was trying very hard to hone in on the screaming, trying to figure out if the screaming was coming from the video or from my house. I did this for about 10, maybe 15 seconds before I took my earphones off. The next thing I could hear is my mom screaming from the top of her lungs with what sounded like complete pain before the house was hit with complete and utter silence, just seconds after hearing the scream. I quickly jumped out of bed in nothing but my pajamas, my heart racing faster than the train I ride to get home. I began to slowly walk to my bedroom door, trying to keep my footsteps as quiet as possible and just listen. Don't breathe. I don't move. I just listen. Nothing. I hear absolutely nothing. It's dead silent. And that's impossible. It's only 10 p.m. Everybody is usually awake until closer to midnight. I I slowly begin to open my bedroom door, but of course, the damn thing creaks louder than a gunshot. I stand there once more, in silence, making sure I hear nothing abruptly come rushing upstairs, trying to investigate the loud door creak. Again, I hear nothing. Just the dead of night. Not even a light gust of wind from outside. I slowly begin to walk out of my room, taking caution with every step I take, my senses on maximum alert. We live in a small 2-story home with my bedroom being upstairs and very close to the stairwell leading to the main floor. It took me little to no time to reach the stairs as I proceeded to slowly descend downward. It takes me a little over a minute just to reach the stairs, given how slow I am walking, but by that time my heart rate slowed a bit, and I was able to think somewhat straight again. Being cognizant of each step I take on the carpeted stairwell, I finally reached the main floor, standing at the foot of the stairs, staring directly at the living room. The whole house is dark, no lights on. The only light I can see is the ominous moonlight ambience shining in from the windows, allowing me to adjust my eyes to the darkness just a bit. I can still hear nobody, and I can see nobody. I don't understand what happened. Maybe I imagined the scream? Nonetheless, whether real or imaginary, I want to ignore my mom's scream. Just can't. Although imaginary it was not. My house is not very modern looking. The living room and kitchen are separated by a wall, so if you wanted to go to the kitchen, you have to go in from the kitchen door. It's the only way in, and I did just that. I didn't see much, but what I could see was the outline of 2 bodies sitting at the dining table, and a small circular table with 4 chairs. "Mom? Dad?" I said with a light whisper, assuming they just fell asleep at the dining table after a few drinks. No answer. Trying to feel the light switch in the near darkness, I call out again, but a little louder. "Mom? Dad?" Still nothing. But that's okay, because I found the light switch and switched it on immediately. However, I was unprepared for what I was about to see. Yes, both figures sitting at the dining table were in fact my mom and my dad. However, I was most certain that they were dead. They were brutally mutilated, defiled, mangled into something not human anymore. I tried looking them in the eyes, but I couldn't because their eyes were no longer there. They sit at the dining table with no arms attached, no eyes, and their necks turned facing directly at me, just staring into my soul. I rushed out of the kitchen as fast as I could, nearly slipping on a small pool of blood I was standing on, all the while holding in some vomit as best as I could. Without thinking, I rushed back upstairs to my room and I think noticed a small figure standing in the bathroom doorway, but I ignored it. The only thing on my mind was getting to my room, locking the door and calling the police, all the while without throwing up all over the place. But then suddenly, without warning, without even remembering what happened next, I woke up. I stared at my bedroom ceiling for maybe an hour or so. It was only 6:30 a.m., so I had plenty of time before I had to go to school. The weird thing is that I didn't feel exhausted like I usually do. But then again, I don't typically wake up this abruptly. This is usually the job of my 7 a.m. alarm clock. 7:30 a.m. hit and I decided to get out of bed after spending the hour pondering what just happened, indirectly thankful for it just being a dream. However, I still felt a little sick to my stomach. Maybe that dream riled me up a bit, I don't know. But what I do know is that I decided to skip breakfast for the day, leaving early for school and just walk to school. My mom usually drops me off in the morning while she's on her way to work, but I figured a nice walk would help me settle down a little. And I did just that. I eventually got to school after a 45-minute walk from my house. It's Friday, so I felt pretty happy when I got to school. Just knowing that today was going to be a short day and that some of my friends will be coming over really cheered me up, despite all the weird things that have been going on these past few days. And just like that, school was out. 2:30 p.m. hit, and me and the boys began our journey to my place. I felt pretty good, actually. A lot better than this morning, at least. And I was somewhat excited to reveal this little girl at the train station to my friends. I really wanted them to see her. As my friends and I were walking towards the train station, we were engaging in some casual talk about the games we would play. My mom recently picked up the new Halo game for me, so we were excited to get some split-screen action throughout the day. I haven't practiced much since it was midterm season this week, but I'm still confident that I can come out on top and beat them. The walk to the train station was a short one, but eventually we got there in no time as we drowned in our conversations. There she is, yes! I said to myself, excited that I could bring up the topic to my friends without sounding crazy. And as usual, she wore the same modern outfit, the same shoulder-height black hair, and most importantly, the same staring into my soul. However, this time, she stood only about 8 to 10 meters away from us. She was very close compared to the first time I saw her a few days ago. Hey guys, do you see that little girl right there? Staring at me? What if I told you she's been standing there for the past 4 days just looking at me? Isn't that messed up? My friends, 2 of them to be exact, both looked in the direction I was pointing and looked at her. They were staring right at the girl with a confused look on their face, as if they were pondering the whole situation right now. Of course, the little girl paid no attention to them. Her eyes were fixed directly on mine. David, who's been a close friend of mine for almost my entire life, continued to stare at her while Mikey did the same. However, David was the first to say a word. Where is she? Mikey followed up with, yeah, what the hell are you smoking, Raphael? You high or something? Stop messing around, she's right there, you're literally looking right at her, I said. Bro, you're screwing around, let's just wait for the train, man. I stood there in shock, not sure if David and Mikey are screwing with me or if they literally can't see her. I don't know what to think now. I've imagined many scenarios of introducing her to people, but I've never imagined this one. The train arrived shortly after, and all 4 of us boarded the train, including the little girl who also boarded the train. In fact, she also boarded the same car as us. 3 of us sat down and began to mind our own business as we waited to arrive at our destination. I spoke up quietly. Do you guys really not see her? Seriously, I need to know. Raphael, bro, there was no one there. Are you good? Like, I don't know what else to tell you, that we literally saw nobody, said Mikey with a serious face, David nodding. Wait, what about now? She's just on the end of the train. She's the only person is standing up. The 2 of them shrugged off the question, then took out their Game Boys and began gaming. I sat there in disbelief, wondering if she is in fact there, or if it's some weird part of my imagination that's been formed these past few days. We've been on that train for what seemed like an eternity, when in fact it only took us about 10 minutes. But thankfully we got to our station, departed, and began walking to my place. Strange, the little girl also departed and then just stood there watching the 3 of us walk away, as if she was a long-lost friend seeing us off for the last time. I paid no mind to this. I just walked away with my friends, trying to keep my mind as blank as possible. The walk back home too felt like a long one, despite it only taking about 15 minutes. We didn't chat much, just some idle boy stuff, and most importantly, no one brought up the little girl or called me crazy. That was a relief, I guess. Unfortunately, my relief would not last very long. When the 3 of us arrived at viewing distance of my house, we noticed 4 police cars and about 2 white vans parked outside of my house. David was the first to say something. Whoa, what the hell is happening at your place, Raphael? Is everything okay? Ignoring David, my heart rate began to race and I began sprinting to my house without realizing it. Whoa, whoa, whoa there, kid. This is a crime scene. You're not allowed near this area. You need to leave right now, said a police officer who was standing outside the house, guarding the yellow-taped passages. At that moment, I could feel my many eyes staring at me. Several police officers, neighbors, and my friends, all staring directly at me. To be honest, at that moment, I kind of preferred the little girl's stare. This is my house. I live here. What happened? Are my parents okay? I said, with tears beginning to roam my face. This officer, wide-eyed, put his arm around my shoulder and began guiding me towards the police car and allowed me to take a seat while he went to go grab somebody. I sat in the back of the police car, face buried in my hands, crying, just letting it all out. But suddenly, a hand found itself on my lap. Startled that somebody was in the car this whole time without me realizing it, I thrust upwards in an anxious position to find the little girl just sitting right next to me with a concerned look on her face. I looked directly into her eyes and asked angrily, "Who the hell are you? What did you do to my family?" No response. "Please, I want to know why you're here. Please." And again, no response. Angered by her silence, I did what I could never do and what my parents taught me never to do. I raised my hand and just began to throw fists. Seeing nothing but pure red through the lens of my eyes, I threw my fists as hard as I could, swinging long and wide at her for what felt like an eternity. Moments later, after calming down somewhat, I look around the car and notice several police officers staring right at me, concern on their face. I then quickly turned my head in the direction of the little girl to find no one there. What the hell? The car door opens and an officer spoke. "Son, are you okay? You look to be having a little bit of a panic attack. We're going to take you over to the police station with us if that's okay. Here, come up to the front seat. We wouldn't want you to feel like a criminal back there." Confused, I did just that and we began our quiet journey to the police station. The drive to the station wasn't too long. The ride was quiet. The officer didn't ask me anything, and in fact, I didn't ask him anything too. All I did was lose myself in my thoughts, with the little girl in the back seat with no seatbelt on. Was last night not a dream? I said to myself, scared that my parents were actually murdered in a horrible way while I was in the house this whole time. Was I actually in the same space as a murderer? I could have died there too. Shortly after spending 10 minutes lost in my thoughts, we arrived at the police station. The officer, really nice at the time, calmly guided me to a small room with a table and 2 chairs in the middle of the room. No windows, no art, just a plain interrogation room. I sat there for only a minute before the same officer who drove me here came back with 2 bottles of water. One for me and one for him, I assumed. "Son, I need to ask you a couple of questions. Once I've done so, I will answer any question you have. Does that sound fair?" said the officer. I nodded, having a hard time forming words right now. "You can call me Officer White, by the way. I take it you're Raphael, yes?" I nodded. "Last night, around 9 p.m., one of your neighbors said that they heard excessive screaming at your house. At the time, they didn't think much of it, since it only lasted a minute or so. However, in the morning, they decided to confront your mother and ask her what was going on before she set out for work. The problem is your mom didn't leave the house for work as she normally would, around 8 a.m., I believe. So according to your neighbor, she's attempted to ring your doorbell, however, no answer. Concerned, your neighbor tried to peek through the window and noticed bloody footsteps at the front of the kitchen. And that's where we come in." As I sat there in silence, 2 additional officers came into the room with a small kit of some sort. Without introducing themselves, they stood next to me and Officer White and opened their kit, revealing what looked like a fingerprint tool thing. "Son, for protocol, we're going to take some prints. Is that all right?" said Officer White. I nodded. The 2 men took their sweet time, taking fingerprint samples from each finger and inputting them via a scanner into their laptop. Once finished analyzing my hands, they turned their attention to my feet and asked to take their measurements. Slowly coming to my senses and understanding the situation I was in, I burst out. I think those are my footsteps in the kitchen. I think I remember seeing my parents dead last night. I thought it was all a dream. I did, because I woke up right after. Are my parents actually dead? Are they missing? Their arms and eyes? What happened?" Tears flowing down my eyes as I burst into an emotional mess. Everybody in the room was silent for a minute. Moments later, the 2 men took my measurements nonetheless. For the next few hours, with many breaks in between, the officer asked me many questions. The usual: where were you yesterday, what were you doing in the evening, at night, just before you went to bed, etc. And I told them the truth. I was at school, then I went home, I had dinner, played games, did homework. Nothing unusual. And I did so as calmly as possible. Unfortunately, despite Officer White's promise, I was never really given the opportunity to ask a question. It was all so one-sided. There is not much else to say, so I'm just going to get to the point. Apparently, I killed my parents that night. I have no recollection of doing it. I only have a recollection of the aftermath. Doctors analyzed me and I told them of the little girl I've been seeing every single day. I don't know the exact medical terminology, but supposedly I was diagnosed with some mental condition which clouded my memories, my judgment, and caused me to hallucinate more often than not. But it's strange. It's strange how my life began falling apart the moment I saw that little girl at the train station. It's as if seeing her triggered something within me. Now, as I sit here telling my story, I will likely spend the rest of my days in the Institute of Mental Health. However, for some reason I feel at peace with that. I don't believe I killed my parents. I honestly don't, but for some reason I feel like I belong here and that I should be here, all alone, with my one and only Alice. The end. And that was The Little Girl at the Train Station. A little bit of a dark one, bit of a twisted storyline behind this, so I hope you enjoyed it. This one was improv, so I actually sat down and wrote this. Whatever came to mind, no planning. It just sat down and wrote, and this is the final product. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you in the next short story. Bye-bye.